Pennington Church family and friends, thank you for joining me on this 3-minute Thursday video devotion. It's nice to be outside after a rain. It makes the green of spring seem all the more beautiful. One thing that I have to confess is I have a hard time waiting. I don't know if that's true for you or not, but while I've been told I'm an incredibly patient person, it's something that I have to actively work at. Whether it's waiting for the driver in front of me to finally go after the light has been green for several seconds, or whether it's waiting on the Lord to act and to move, I routinely wrestle with my impatience. I don't mean to sound sacrilegious, but Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers had a very popular hit single in the early 1980s that sums it up pretty well for me. The waiting is the hardest part. But the life of the Christian is often periods of activity, wonderful activity, but punctuated by periods of waiting and sometimes hard waiting. So in those times and periods when we're waiting, how do we deal and how do we cope and how do we manage? And what do we do when we're waiting on the Lord to act, whether that is waiting on the results of a test to come back or a call or an email from an interviewer, or whether it's waiting on the Lord to answer the constant cry and prayer of your heart that if it be His will for Him to allow the circumstances to work out in a way that honors Him. Well, one thing we're told repeatedly in the Scriptures is to wait on the Lord, but in those periods of waiting, we should devote to prayer. And on the Sunday, I'm going to preach on the ascension of Jesus into heaven. It's one of the most neglected, but also most fundamental tenets of the Christian faith. But just before Jesus ascended, He gave orders to His disciples not to leave and go anywhere. Most probably, He meant not to go back to Galilee, where most of them were from. But as we read this command of Jesus in Acts chapter 1, verses 4 and 5, we hear Jesus tell them to do something, and that's to wait. And while staying with them, Jesus ordered them not to depart from Jerusalem, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which He said, "You heard from me. For John baptized with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now." Now, it's almost certain that the disciples did not fully understand what Jesus meant, that they would be baptized with the Holy Spirit. That was something of a magnitude that had never happened before. And then Jesus' language that it would be not many days from now left it pretty wide open as to how long they were to wait. But what the disciples did was to follow Jesus' command to wait. And they waited together, and while they were waiting, they prayed. Now, I've heard this fact twisted and completely misunderstood. The false teaching goes something like this, that the disciples gathered together and they were praying, and because of their prayer, the Lord saw their faith and He moved and He sent the Holy Spirit. I think you can see the problem here, which is that it places the emphasis and even the power in the hands of the disciples. But it wasn't because of their prayer that the Lord sent the Holy Spirit. It wasn't even in response to their prayer that the Lord sent the Holy Spirit. Jesus had promised that this was going to take place, so it was going to happen no matter what they did. But all the disciples probably thought was that it would be soon, and they didn't know how long they were to wait. So in the waiting, they prayed. Now, this is something that I'm trying to learn more and more each day, is that in the waiting, since God in His wisdom hasn't revealed to me any of His timing, I'm trying to emulate those of the early church and to content myself with prayer. And may that be an encouragement for all of us to lean on Paul's admonition in Philippians 4, not to be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let our requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. And may the peace of God guard your heart and your mind. God bless you, Pennington. I love you very much.